have the video on.
15, 15.
And
no pressure, but I might have clicked the stream button.
Oh.
Oh,
Hello, everyone.
okay.
Hello, world.
Remember 1978?
Everybody could hear that?
Yeah. Maybe
Okay.
turn it down a tiny bit though. It was very loud. But we
What's
can also-
that?
I said it was really loud, so maybe if you could turn it down a little bit.
Okay.
But people can also just turn down their own volume. But
Okay, I'll try to remember that because sometimes I have to turn it up to hear because I'm deaf. So,
yeah.
okay. Okay, so we're good to go?
Looks like we're good. No gray bars. Sound is good. I think we're good.
Okay, so Benny, what do I need to do now?
Just hit start webinar and record when you're ready.
Okay, do I hit this broadcast button up at the top?
Yeah.
Okay, so that. And then we'll record. Okay.
Oh,
I'm
Benny.
gonna keep it. What's that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, Benny. Did you or can you put it on Discord again?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Awesome.
And we have somebody monitoring Facebook, right?
Daniela should be doing that.
Okay.
Or is it Crystal? I do not remember, honestly.
I'm doing YouTube right now.
Oh, okay.
I don't have Facebook. I would do that, but I don't have Facebook.
Okay. Benny, would you be able to do Facebook like in the background just in case?
Yeah.
We don't really get questions from there, but just in case.
So hello, if you just came in, we're gonna wait a couple minutes. It looks like some people might be still kind of trickling in. So we'll wait a couple minutes and then we'll start when we have a few more people.
Welcome, Giver and Julia. We're happy to have you guys here.
Maybe just so I can get a good idea, any idea how many people we had signed up for this one? Okay.
I'm gonna send this out to Pre-Law Club, see if we get anyone from there.
Are you guys good over here?
Yeah, I was just wondering how many people we had signed up. I don't want to start if we had a bunch of people that were signed up and are not here yet.
11.
Okay.
Does that include us?
I see Crystal did, but I just resend confirmations to all of them, so they should be getting emails about attending. I just did that.
So what do y'all think? Do you think we should just go ahead and get started? And if they come in a little bit late, it's fine?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
it's possible they're on other platforms as well.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and start. So those of you that are here, or if you're watching live somewhere else, thank you for attending. We're pretty excited about this one. This is our last workshop, and this is going to be a rather in-depth one. So we're really glad that you're here, and we hope that you get as much out of it and that you feel better about voting. So there's a couple of things we were going to get into, but before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Laura Lewis, and I'm a librarian on campus. And this is, like I said, our last workshop in our Get Out the Vote series. And before we start, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about a guide that I created for the election. So the guide is basically on how you can vote in this election. So it has a lot of different information and resources about what you're going to see on the ballot, how you can actually vote regarding voting by mail, dropping off your ballot, what to do on election day, that kind of thing. So there's tons of different resources. What I'd like to point out right now is our tab on the ballot measures. So you'll be hearing me say measures or propositions quite a bit. They mean the same thing. So these are the different things that are going to be on the ballot for California. And so they're different initiatives that voters are going to be voting either yes or no on. And we're going to take a real deep dive into that later. It's going to be what most of this workshop is. However, this guide has a lot of resources that we're going to be using and talking about. And so I wanted to show where you can go afterwards if you would like to watch videos again or look on these resources yourself. So all of the videos are up here on my guide for each and every one of the ballot propositions. There's a video, and they're very, very helpful. They're about a minute long. So highly encourage you to check them out. Also, if you scroll down, there is a box with different resources. And there's one in particular that I wanted to show is the California ballot measures campaign finance activity. So I'm guessing it doesn't necessarily sound very intriguing or interesting. Campaign finance activity makes it sound very, very boring, but it's actually really, really helpful. Basically what it is it's following the money. So all of these propositions, they all have different groups and people for and against, and they are all throwing a lot of money at advertising for them and things like that. And this website focuses on where that money is coming from and who these people are. And so it has each and every one ballot measure listed, and you can click on it. Then you can see what groups are supporting it and what groups are opposing it. You can then click on that and it tells you what money that they've spent and things like that. Now, what I also really like is that you can then just highlight the name of the group, because it's often difficult to know who exactly is behind this group with their name. And you can just copy and paste it right into Google and you can find their website really easy so that you can learn a little bit about who they are and why they are for or against this particular measure. So I know that was kind of a lot to introduce, but I just wanted everyone to be aware that this guide does exist and that it is really, really helpful to use. So I'm going to put this link into the chat box. Feel free to click on the link, and maybe if you would like, bookmark the site or kind of take note of it so that you can always go to it later when you are voting or you're getting ready to vote. Okay, so that's there. And I just realized I did send that to the panelists. Now you should be getting it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. And I would like to start by introducing some of the people that I have here today. So there's going to be two other speakers besides myself. One of them is Vice President Emma McNellis from the SGA. And then we also have President Gian Gayatao of the SGA. He's going to be speaking as well. I also just want to throw out that we have a couple of other SGA members. We have Senator Edith Mata is going to be kind of working the chat for us. And she's going to be kind of letting us know if we have any questions from you and things like that. And then we also have Crystal Knox, Senator from the SGA as well. And she's kind of going to be looking at our live chats, or excuse me, the live streams. So we've got a lot of different people working on this, including our very own Benny. He is our tech wizard and he helps us troubleshoot any tech issues that come up, and he's been really awesome. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to turn the table to VP Emma McNellis so that she can kind of get started with the presentation. Take it away, Emma.
All right, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Laura. And thank you everyone for being here, panelists, and all of our audience who is here today. Laura, if you could move to the first slide, I can get our presentation moving. All right, so this first slide, we just wanted to provide a nice overview of everything that is going to be on your ballot for this upcoming November 3rd, 2020 general election. So in this general election, voters will be doing about 5 different things. Number 1, you'll be choosing a president. You'll be voting for a president. Number 2, you'll be voting for a House of Representatives candidate for the district that you live in. Number 3, you'll be voting for an assemblyman for the state legislator, dependent on the district that you live in again. And then number 4, you'll be voting yes or no on the 12 proposed state laws for California. And then lastly, you'll vote for any other candidates and proposed laws depending on where you live. And something that we wanted to say before we moved on is that as a voter, you do not have to vote on everything in order for your votes to be counted, right? If there is something that you are unsure on or you don't have full information on, don't just vote yes because your friend voted yes or something like that. Don't just vote yes because you don't really know what it's talking about. If you don't know something, you are more than welcome to just leave it blank, and all of your votes that you did vote yes or no on, or for certain candidates, those votes will all still be counted. That is just something that we really wanted to kind of just put out there for all of you to know, because I don't think it's common knowledge. I especially didn't know that the first time that I went and voted. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to President Gian Gayatao to fittingly introduce the 2020 presidential candidates.
Yeah, well, thank you for that introduction, Emma. So and thank you again for anyone watching this right now, and to those who's going to view it. So right now, I will be talking about giving you a quick rundown on who's running for the president position in our government. So for the Democratic Party, you have the main candidates for president, Joseph Robinette Biden; for vice president, Kamala Harris. For the Republican Party, you have incumbent president Donald J. Trump and incumbent vice president Michael Pence. Running as independents are Roque de la Fuente, or Rocky Guerra, and Kanye West as his running mate. For the Libertarian Party, you have Joe Jorgensen and Jeremy Spike Cohen. For the Green Party, you have Howie Hawkins and Angela Nicole Walker. And finally, for the Peace and Freedom candidate, you have Gloria La Riva and Sunil Freeman. And then you will also have your eligible write-in write-ins for this presidential position. Now, with that in mind, that the president is the head of the executive branch of the federal government. He or she will sign or veto laws that have been proposed and passed by the legislative branch, which is your Congress, your representatives, and the executive branch is sort of executing the laws, putting them into action. So we highly really encourage you, empower you to do your research on how the principles and how their plans of action will affect your day-to-day lives as well as the futures. So we highly encourage you to do your homework and research before you decide on this our presidential candidates. And with that, I'll be handing it off to Ms. Laura Lewis to discuss the candidates for the federal branch, House of Representatives, as well as the state assembly candidates.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure and start with by explaining the difference between the House of Representatives and what the California State Assembly is, because they're actually two different things. So the House of Representatives, you can think of that as kind of like on the national level. So the House of Representatives, the candidates or the politicians, they are the ones that go to Washington, D.C., and they represent California or this district in California as a national whole level. Now, the California State Assembly, these are politicians that represent our area, but only statewide. So they go to Sacramento and they deal with like state issues, whereas the House of Representatives, they deal with state issues, but they also deal with issues on a national level in terms of California in our district at like Washington, D.C. at the national level. So we have a couple different races going on, and it depends on where you live. So you'll see that each of these different races has a district number, and so that might confuse you. That's okay. So what that means is that they're each very specific to a little geographical area in terms of like county and city lines and things like that. So you may be confused and like, okay, well, which people do I need to vote for? Who should I research? That is going to depend where you live, and I recommend that you use a tool called Voter's Edge. And what you can do is you can put your address into that, and it will tell you exactly what district you live in and what's going to be on your ballot. So depending on where you live, you might be in District 21 or you might be in District 23. So for those of you that are in District 21, you'll see David Valadao and TJ Cox. Those are the two opponents. TJ Cox is the Democratic candidate and David Valadao is the Republican candidate. In District 23, for House of Representatives, you have the Democratic candidate, Ken Magone, and then you have the incumbent, who's Kevin McCarthy. He's the Republican candidate. As for state assembly, though, we have District 32 and 34. So in 32, we have the incumbent Rudy Salas, and then we have the Republican candidate Todd Cotta. For 34, we have Julie Solis, and then we also have for the Republican candidate Vince Fong. Now, these are all on Voter's Edge, and the guide that I showed earlier has pictures of all of them and links to where you can get information on every single one. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide and turn the mic over.
Alrighty, so we will now be getting into the 12 propositions for California. And so we just wanted to do a quick list with a very, very brief kind of title or summary of what the propositions are about. For example, Proposition 14 would allow for more stem cell research, in short. And we will, in the following slides, the three of us will be going into more depth and more detailed explanations on each one of these propositions for further understanding. So that's just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing. And with that being said, Laura, you can go ahead and move on to our first proposition. All right, so Proposition 14, stem cell research. So Proposition 14 would allow the state to sell $5.5 billion in new bonds to pay for more stem cell research and medical treatments. $1.5 billion from the bonds would go to research and treatment for brain diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So with this proposition, if you vote yes, what this means is that you are voting that the state can sell $5.5 billion in general obligation bonds, primarily for stem cell research and the development of new medical treatments in California. Now, I know when I first read about this, I had no idea what a general obligation bond was. So just so you all know, a general obligation bond is a common type of bond in the United States that is secured by a state or local government's pledge to use legally available resources, including tax revenues, to repay the bondholders. So that's just a quick definition of what a general obligation bond is. And remember, this would be selling $5.5 billion worth of those bonds. And so a no vote on this proposition would mean that the sale of these bonds would not be allowed. So you are against the sale of those $5.5 billion in general obligation bonds. And so we will now get into the kind of for and against arguments. So beginning with what people for Proposition 14 say is they tend to argue that stem cell bonds have led to new medical treatments and important research that should be continued, as well as Proposition 14 provides money that would help fight many serious diseases, including cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. And then just a few names and organizations that are for this proposition include California Governor Gavin Newsom, the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, and the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California. And then moving on to what people against Proposition 14 say. So they tend to say that we should not be spending millions of dollars on Proposition 14 when so many people are out of work. And then the federal government and private groups are already helping pay for important stem cell research. So a few people who are against Proposition 14 include Jeff Sheehy, who is a board member for the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. And he actually said that Proposition 14 is unaffordable, unnecessary, fatally flawed, and unsupportable. So just another extra little snippet behind Proposition 14 that I'd like to share is that if you look at the end of what people against Proposition 14 say, it says that the federal government and private groups are already helping pay for this research. And so I want to explain where they're getting that from. So in 2014, California actually opted in to fill the federal void by borrowing $3 billion to create California's own stem cell agency. So with that being said, people for Proposition 14 argue that now that $3 billion is drying up, there's not much of that money left. So without a fresh new institution of more money, the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine would no longer exist. And then people against it argue that obviously we tried it in 2014 and it didn't lead to the kind of life-saving cures that voters hoped for in 2004, and that's why they are against it. So with that being said, that's kind of an overview of Proposition 14. Hope that helped you understand, and we'll go ahead and move on to Proposition 15. All right. Edith, did we have any questions on Proposition 14 really quickly before I move on? I'm going to take silence as a no, but Edith, feel free to let me know at the end if there are any questions at all. And then I will go ahead and move on to Proposition 15. Okay, so Proposition 15 is a little bit of a confusing one because kind of anything that has to do with taxes is pretty confusing, and Proposition 15 is no exception. Okay, thank you, Edith. And Proposition 15 is no exception. And we have a short video for you to help explain this kind of confusing proposition. And keep in mind, these are the videos that are on Laura's LibGuide if you would like to see these for all of the propositions. But here's the one for Proposition 15.
Remember 1978? California's home prices were soaring. Some homeowners, led by this guy, were mad as hell about their ever-increasing property taxes. So voters passed Prop 13, and Californians have been busy voting on property taxes ever since. Over the last 4 decades, Californians have passed more than 20 ballot measures adding new rules for how homes and other properties are taxed. 2020 is no different, but Prop 15, also known as split roll, is the big one. If it passes, it will be the biggest change to California's tax system in a generation. Let me explain.
Hi, I'm Ben Christopher. I'm a political reporter with Cal Matters, and I'm going to explain Prop 15 in a minute.
Properties used to be taxed based on the current home price. If a house's value doubled, so did the taxes. Then voters put a stop to that. Under Prop 13, properties are taxed based on their original purchase price. The longer you stay in your home, the larger the tax break. That also applies to commercial properties, which leads us to Prop 15. Prop 15 splits homes from commercial properties, putting them on different tax rolls, hence split roll. If it passes, nothing changes for homeowners, but lots of commercial landlords would be stripped of their Prop 13 protections and will probably have to start paying a lot more. Not so for small businesses and farms. They're exempt. Supporters say this is a great way to provide more funding to cash-strapped schools and local governments, and that large corporations will pay the most. Opponents say this would be one of the largest tax increases ever, and they warn that landlords will pass the higher costs on to their tenants, which might be small businesses. So, vote yes if you want commercial properties to be taxed based on today's mostly higher market prices. Vote no if you want to keep things the way they are. For more on the 2020 election and everything else about California's politics, go to calmatters.org.
All right, thank you. So that was just a short, hopefully very helpful introduction to what Proposition 15 is. And I will now explain it again because I'm sure that will be helpful because I'm sure that was a lot of information all at once. So Proposition 15, if it passes, it would change the rules for taxes on commercial property. Commercial property would be taxed based on what the property is worth now, instead of small increases each year based on its original purchase price. The new rules would only apply to people and businesses that own more than $3 million in commercial property. So there would be no change in taxes on residential homes. And Proposition 15 would also lower taxes on business equipment like machines or computers. So with that being said, like it said in the video, if you vote yes on this proposition, that means that property taxes on most commercial properties worth more than $3 million would go up in order to provide new funding for local governments and schools. And then a no vote, on the other hand, would mean that property taxes on the state's large businesses that are worth more than $3 million would stay the same, right? So no change in the way the taxing is currently. So now moving on to for and against arguments. To begin with what people for Proposition 15 say, wealthy companies and business property owners should pay property taxes based on what their holdings are really worth. So a quick background before I explain this further. So they kind of briefly explained this in the video. Back in 1978, California voters actually passed Proposition 13, and Proposition 13 was basically a huge permanent tax cut for landowners. It amended the state constitution to reset property taxes based on the purchase price of a home or business and capped how much the tax could increase each year after that, right? So people for this proposition say that Proposition 13 has provided a massive tax break to some of the state's larger businesses, and if this passes, a small fraction of those would pay the vast majority of the higher taxes. And then another thing that they say is that taxes from Proposition 15 will help pay for important public services such as schools and fire departments, right? So all of the money that is gained from the increased taxes on those more wealthy businesses would go to cities, countries, and school districts, right? And then for the against arguments, number one, raising taxes will increase the cost of everything that people buy, including food, gas, and healthcare. And then also that Proposition 15 would hurt small businesses that are struggling during the current pandemic. So they're basically arguing that because this would create such a huge tax increase, doing this in the middle of a very bad recession due to the pandemic would be detrimental. And they claim that although small businesses are exempt from the proposition's wording, they believe that large large landowners or large landlords, I guess, large landlords could end up passing the costs to some of their tenants and customers instead of just taking it for themselves. And just a few people who are for this proposition include Joe Biden, Governor Gavin Newsom, and California Teachers Association. And then a few people who are against this proposition is the California Chamber of Commerce, the California Retailers Association, and the California NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So there's a nice summary of Proposition 15. I hope that helped break it down a little bit in more understandable terms. And we'll go ahead and move on to Proposition 16. All right, so this one is very interesting. So Proposition 16, if it passes, would allow public colleges, universities, and agencies to include race, sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin as part of their decision-making. They would be allowed to create affirmative action programs to increase diversity or to help certain groups. So if you vote yes for Proposition 16, that means that you are voting that state and local entities could consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin in public education, public employment, and public contracting to promote diversity to the extent allowed under federal law. And what I mean by to the amount allowed under federal law is that there's actually a Supreme Court case that bans quotas. So that means like saying we need this percentage of women and we need this percentage of African Americans. You can't have a percentage system, you can't have a quota system. However, it would allow for the considering race, sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin, if that makes sense. And then a no vote would mean that the current Proposition 209 ban on consideration of race, sex, color, ethnicity, and national origin in public education, public employment, and public contracting would remain in effect. So public colleges, universities, and agencies would not be allowed to include those considerations when making decisions. So what people for Proposition 16 say is that, number one, Proposition 16 would help women and people of color while fighting longstanding patterns of discrimination. You know, they argue that California is a lot more diverse than it was when Proposition 209 passed. And Proposition 209 is the proposition that banned considerations and decision making on the basis of sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin. That's Prop 209. And so they argue that California is a lot more diverse than it was when that proposition was passed. And then they also argue that all of us deserve equal opportunities and quality educations, and Proposition 16 would help do that. And then people against Proposition 16 say that the state should treat everyone equally, right? So allowing schools and government offices to make decisions based on these considerations is its own kind of prejudice, right? Equal rights mean that everyone is treated equally, no matter their race or their gender, right? And that's the point that they're trying to make there. And then also, when deciding who gets into college or who gets a government job, we should not favor one racial or ethnic group over another. So that's what people against Proposition 16 say. So a few people who are for Proposition 16 include, again, California Governor Gavin Newsom, the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. So that's the student government for the community colleges on the state level, and then also the student government for the California State Universities on a state level. Those are all organizations that are for it. And then people who are against this proposition include Students for Fair Admissions, the Chinese American Civic Action Alliance, and Californians for Equal Rights Association. And so that is a summary of Proposition 16. So I'm not seeing any questions so far, so we can go ahead and move right along. Could you go to the next? Oh, okay, sorry, I was just lagging. All right, Proposition 17. Okay, so voting rights for people on parole. So this proposition is actually a constitutional amendment. And Proposition 17 would allow for people on parole to register to vote in elections, and certain people on parole would be allowed to run for public office as well. So if you vote yes for Proposition 16, or excuse me, I keep doing that. If you vote yes for Proposition 17, that means that you are voting that people on state parole who are US citizens, residents of California, and at least 18 years of age would be able to vote if they register, obviously. But they would have those voting rights. And then if you vote no, that means that people on state parole would continue to not be able to vote in California. So what people for Proposition 17 say is that people on parole pay taxes. Therefore, they should be allowed to vote as well. So they're contributing to society by paying taxes. Therefore, they should be able to vote on propositions that control our taxes, such as Proposition 15. If they're paying taxes, they should be able to vote on things like that. And also that parole is a time for people to rebuild their lives, and voting helps people on parole feel more connected to their communities. And so like what we mean by this is that civic engagement could possibly lead to fewer parolees committing other crimes, because it allows them to help remove the stigma of their past, right? People who complete their prison sentences deserve the right to still participate in their democracy. And then people against Proposition 17 argue that parole is a time for serious and violent criminals to prove that they've changed, and that when people get out of prison, they should complete parole before being allowed to vote. So there's kind of a difference of a definition of what this parole time period is for. You know, people for Proposition 17 say, oh, parole is a time for people to rebuild their lives, right? This is their chance to get more involved and become a good citizen. And people against Prop 17 argue that no, parole is a time for serious and violent criminals to prove that they've changed, right? They have to prove themselves before they're given that right to vote. And so it's kind of a different definition of what that period is for. And so, yeah, so again, people against it, they believe that parole is an opportunity for violent offenders to prove that they've rehabilitated, and that they should get that voting right after they've demonstrated that, not before. And so with that, that's going to complete my section, and I'm now, hopefully that helped you guys out on Propositions 14 through 17. And I will now pass it over to President Gaetau to start explaining Propositions 18 through 21.
Alrighty, thank you for that, Emma. So right now on the screen, we'll be discussing Proposition 18. So Proposition 18 will be a constitutional amendment to the state California Constitution to permit 17-year-olds to vote in primary and special elections if they will turn 18 by the next general election and be otherwise eligible to vote. So a yes would mean that 17-year-olds who aren't 18 yet but will be 18 at the time of the main election can be eligible to vote on our primaries, which are like how we choose our candidates for our parties. So currently 18 other states and Washington, D.C. allowed this group of people to vote in primaries. And it's also good to know that only 16% of eligible California voters aged 18 to 24, so the young people, the youth, turn out to vote in the March 2020 primary. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the future when if this amendment proposition gets passed. So supporters say allowing 17-year-olds to vote in the primary when they'll be 18 during the general election allows them to shape their choices and become more informed and aware of their vote in the general election. So having the chance to see whether or not the candidates that they pick in the primaries will fulfill their promises leading up to the election. So others say that even though that they're not even legally adults, many 17-year-olds are already dealing with adult activities or other functions in their lives, such as working, paying taxes, paying for their own education, which a lot of us have already been doing. And opposition, on the other end, say that 17-year-olds are still legally minors, and there's no reason for them to vote before they are legal adults. Some also argue that because teenagers' brains are in the process of developing, the cognitive part of the brain, they argue that they don't have the same reasoning as adults would, and maturity as adult brains would have. So the main proponents of this of Proposition 18 is California Governor Gavin Newsom, Secretary of State Alex Padilla, the California Association of Student Councils, and the League of Women Voters of California. The main proponent would be the association or the Election Integrity Project California. And so that is the main aspects of Prop 18. We'll be moving on to Proposition 19. All right, for Proposition 19, Proposition 19 is a mash of the two different property tax measures. One would potentially expend savings for mostly older homeowners and victims of disasters such as all our wildfires happen in California, and the other would potentially limit savings for people who inherit homes from their parents. But if you're not a homeowner, Prop 19 will affect you too. So what a yes on Prop 19 means that all homeowners above 55 would be eligible for a property tax saving or a tax break when they move, and only inherited properties would be eligible for that. And a no vote would mean that tax assessments would still be allowed from inherited homes. So the current rules have been in effect since the late 70s when Prop 13 was passed. That legislation allows homeowners to attach their property taxes on the value of their house when they bought it, not the current market value. So for example, if you bought a house in Bakersfield 20 to 25 years ago for $250,000, your taxes are based on the original price you paid, even though the house value has already multiplied and doubled and tripled. And if you buy a new house, your taxes would increase substantially because they'll be calculated according to the current market price of your new home. So in a much broader sense, it can be much cheaper to hold on to a house than to buy a new one. But there are also current scenarios where homeowners can't keep paying low property taxes even when they move. People who are over 55, severely disabled, or victims of tragedies and disasters can transfer the tax base of their current home to a new property if the new place is of equal or lesser value and in the same county. So these are your exceptions to that. Prop 19 would change part of that. The lower rate transfer would be allowed for any home in the state, and instead of only once, you could do it 3 times. This is part of the measure that would expand savings. And a similar measure was put in 2 years ago in 2018, and it was rejected. And it's being attempted again now with a second provision attached. And that second provision attached to this one is the part that would limit savings, and it affects a group of would-be homeowners, children who would inherit their parents' houses. Because currently, if a homeowner dies or perishes and their children inherit the property, they have to keep the property tax base, even if they aren't living in the house. So Prop 19 would allow that to happen if the home becomes their primary residence. So in support of supporting argument for Prop 19 is that our current property tax rules give people who've owned their homes in California for many years little incentive to move. So why opt out for a higher property tax in a skyrocketing house market? But this means that tighter housing supply, fewer options available on the market, and not enough people willing to move on or downsize to free up properties. So Prop 19 supporters argue that it's time to loosen that chokehold on the housing market. They also say that restricting the inheritance rules will also close a loophole created in the late 70s that has allowed people to rent out inherited property with low taxes. And for Arguments against or the opposition say that this measure expands tax savings for one group of homeowners while limiting savings for another. And this exacerbates such inequality and a poor substitute for meaningful reform of our property tax transfer rules and tax breaks. And allowing older Californians to hold on to their tax breaks when moving will enable already wealthy homeowners to keep consolidating wealth and with revenues that fund local schools and governments being used. And so an analysis of it would be that an analysis made by the Legislative Analyst Office estimated that 85,000 older Californians within that range move every year without taking advantage of property tax transfers. And if they were to do so under Prop 19, local governments would needlessly lose revenue. And even though restrictions on inheritance rules could result in more revenue, opponents also say that reserving those funds for wildfire efforts becomes an obstacle to government's ability, to the local government's ability to direct resources to wherever they're needed. And so the main supporters, prominent names in support of Prop 19 would be Governor Newsom, the California Professional Firefighters, the Californians for Disability Rights, and Congress of California Seniors. And the main names for opposing it would be the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And so that's the main thing, the main rundown of Prop 19. Moving on to Proposition 20. So Proposition 20 would restrict parole for nonviolent offenders, and it would authorize felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors. So this will be, it would not be a California amendment to the Constitution. It would be an initiative statute of law put in place. And so a yes on Prop 20 would mean that crimes would be added to the list of violent felonies for which early parole is restricted to. Also, certain types of theft-related crimes and misdemeanors would require a collection sample of DNA. And a no would mean that the state's releasing processes won't be changed for parole, and no crimes would be added, and DNA collection will only be required if a crime is convicted. So Proposition 20 would make it easier to charge certain crimes as felonies and prohibit early parole for more crimes. So it's like an effort to roll back portions of previous measures designed to reduce California's state prison population. And one of them is Proposition 47, 2014, and that allows certain nonviolent minor crimes to be charged as misdemeanors when they were previously classified as felonies, or could have been classified as either a misdemeanor or felony, and which we call as robberies. So they include shoplifting, property theft, forgeries of bank checks, and certain cases of possessing illegal possessions of drugs. So another measure in 2016 made it easier for certain felons to get released early on parole. Nonviolent inmates could get released after serving the sentence for their primary offense, and while other inmates could earn credits to reduce their sentences through good behavior or participation. So Prop 20 would revert some of those provisions. Certain theft and fraud crimes would once again be robberies instead of misdemeanors, including vehicle theft, firearm theft, and unlawful use of forgery. And so additionally, it would require people who were convicted of these misdemeanors that were robberies prior to 2014 to submit a sample of their DNA for collection. So in support of Proposition 20, the fact that domestic abusers, child traffickers, and those who have used and drugged people are currently considered as nonviolent offenders who are eligible for early release. And they all supporters of this proposition also say that previous provisions of Proposition 47 and 57 in the past led to an increase in crime, and it must be rolled back in order to protect our public safety. And so an analysis again from the Public Policy Institute of California found that there was no evidence that would lead to an increase in violent crime. And they also say that reclassifying low-level theft and drug crimes inadvertently led to far less DNA collection. So the opposition argument for Proposition 20 is that overall crime rates in California remain low. For LA County, for example, violent crime is at its lowest rate in the 1960s, and property crimes declined in 2019. And given that fact, recidivism is the tendency to commit a crime after going into prison. So recidivism decreased due to the Proposition 47. And also, particularly at a time when our nation is trying to fix our criminal justice system, there has been a disproportionate effect that this proposition can have on our minority communities, African American communities, and Latino communities. And instead of pushing for more funds into public safety and making our communities secure and safe, there will be more funds to mass incarceration. Because currently, in the state of California alone, I believe that there's to fund one prisoner a day costs $75,000, which is increasingly a huge amount than to put into other services such as rehabilitation or education. So the main proponents for Prop 20 would be the California Retailers Association, Republican Assembly Member Vince Fong, who represents our county, Kern County, and Democratic Assembly Member Jim Cooper. Who's against this measure? Governor Gavin Newsom and the California Teachers Association. So those are the main provisions and effects that Prop 20 can cause. Moving on to the last proposition that I will cover is Proposition 21. Prop 21 is based on rent control. So Prop 21 would expand the authority of the local governments to enact and establish rent control on residential property that is older than 15 years. So this will be like Prop 20. This will be an initiative statute of law, and it wouldn't be a constitutional amendment. So it will be a new law put into place. A yes on Prop 21 would mean that local governments will be allowed to enact rent control on properties older than 15 years. And while a no vote would mean that rent control would continue to be prohibited for properties 15 years older and housing units such as single-family homes. So this measure would expand the power of the local governments to pass rent control, because under the current law, cities can't enact rent control on any buildings first occupied after February 1st, 1995. So that's like the 15-year cutoff limit on establishing rent controls. And it also says that a landlord can raise rents to market rates if a tenant moves out. And aside from that, California cities set their own rent control policies. So an establishment, so a passing of Prop 21 would have a mandate all throughout the state for the local governments can use. So Prop 21 wouldn't create any kind of rent control policy, theoretically, but things could stay exactly the same if it were passed. But the measure would allow cities to apply new, presumably stricter rent control measures if they choose. And like I said earlier, single-family homes would be exempt as long as owners own no more than 2 properties. And the arguments in support of this one is that the housing and homeless situation in California is very profound and staggering. Our homelessness is one of the insecurities that we face as a state and as in our county as well. So in LA County alone, for example, the homeless rate jumped 13% within the past year, and that was even before the pandemic. So supporters say that we need more flexibility with rent control to protect tenants from eviction and potential homelessness. And they also point out that this proposition doesn't create or mandate any new rent control policies, but will only allow local communities to decide what's best for their own situations. And while the opposition for this, for Prop 21, the critics say that rent control is not the answer to the housing crisis. They say that we need policies that would encourage greater housing access and affordability, and not just rent control. And they also, given that California passed a rent control law in this year, which caps rent increases across the state at 5%, plus the local rate of inflation. For the state, this state law provides more rent stability without affecting landlords. And the opponents of Prop 21 say that this proposition would undermine that. And the main prominent names, supporters of Prop 21 would be Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, Dolores Huerta, and the Eviction Defense Network. And who's against this measure? California Governor Gavin Newsom and the California Apartment Association. So that's it for Prop 18 to 21. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. And now I'll be handing it off to Ms. Laura Lewis to handle, to give you a rundown of Prop 22 to 25.
Thanks, Jan. Before I kind of dive in, I know you're kind of like taking in a lot of information right now. So I just kind of wanted to kind of pause for a second and give you a chance to ask any questions. If something, was said that you're a little confused about. If you are still feeling confused, I just want to say that's okay. This is a lot of information, and Emma and Jan have done amazing research and have really done a great job. But it does take time to kind of like digest all of this information. So if you're still feeling like, oh man, I have this information, but I'm kind of not sure how to process it yet, that's completely normal. That's okay. And that's why we have the guide that you can go back to, and there's videos that you can go back to as well. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. I'm not seeing anything, so that's okay. If anything comes up, we do have Edith manning the chat room, so she will see if you do have a question, and she can kind of get us to pause if we need to, so that we can answer those, or we can wait till the end. So having said that, thank you everyone for attending and for listening. This has been really awesome, and I've learned a bunch listening to this. This has been great. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start talking about Prop 22. So Prop 22 has to do with rideshare and delivery drivers. So I'm willing to bet a couple of things. One, that you've probably had some kind of access to Uber or Lyft, or maybe you've had something delivered to your house from Grubhub and things like that. My husband and I have had that a lot in this pandemic for sure. And so what this has to do with, it has to do with the drivers, right? So this whole proposition has to do with the drivers themselves and what kind of employee they're considered. So how they're considered right now is they're considered independent contractors. So what that means is that they don't have a set amount of hours, they don't have benefits, they don't have sick leave, they don't have any of that. What happens is they can pick and choose their own hours, and it kind of leaves them open to have other jobs. And a lot of times this is one of a couple of different jobs that these drivers have, or maybe sometimes they just need something kind of part-time. Now, what this proposition is saying is it wants to keep these drivers as independent contractors. And so companies that are for this are like Uber and Lyft and things like that. They want to keep these drivers as independent contractors. They're saying that if they're not independent contractors, and that they were, if they're forced to consider them paid employees with benefits and things like that, that would kind of hurt them financially, and that would actually create less jobs for these drivers. So that could end up hurting people because they wouldn't necessarily be able to be a driver and get this kind of side money, because Uber and Lyft and companies like that would have to really minimize how many people that they hired. So Lyft and Uber and things like that, they are for Prop 22, because what Prop 22 is doing is it's keeping these employees as independent contractors. So there's a whole other side to this issue. And the other side is people are saying that these delivery drivers and rideshare drivers, they deserve to be employees that have benefits and that have sick leave and all these types of things. And so they think that they should have those benefits and that they should be treated as employees so that they have actual rights as employees. So think about like your own job right now. So if you work at anywhere from like Target to like a fast food place to a restaurant to a small business or whatever, as an employee, you probably have a set amount of hours. You probably also have rights and to sick leave and things like that. As opposed to the drivers, again, they're considered independent contractors. So the people that are against Prop 22 are organizations like for workers' rights and nonprofit advocacy organizations who think that the drivers should have access to those employee rights. So there's two different sides here. I'm also willing to bet that if you have seen any kind of advertising or gotten any kind of text messages or emails, it's probably been about this proposition. If we were to look at the campaign finance site that I showed earlier, we would see there's a lot of money flowing through this advertising for both yes and for no on this proposition. So if you've seen a lot of those advertisements, a lot of them are for yes. It's good to always think about the other side of it. It's always good to kind of get this neutral information and get the for and against and get both sides. Okay, so hopefully everyone kind of got that. I didn't think I did as beautiful job as Emma or Jean on it. I did my best. So I'm going to check the chat box really quickly and see if there's any questions. It looks like maybe Edith kind of got something. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to 23. And this one has to do with kidney dialysis clinics. Now, if you have voted before, specifically in 2018, this probably sounds familiar to you. This was on the ballot before this year, and it was actually voted against. So back in 2018, this proposition lost. It didn't get enough votes. And so it's back again. And so we're going to be voting on it again and see if it's the same or if we have kind of a different outcome this time. So let me talk about kidney dialysis clinics. So these are places that people who have problems with their kidneys, so for example, like kidney cancer and like kidney failure from like different kind of diseases and things like that, they will have to get dialysis. And basically it helps them filter out all the bad stuff in their body because their kidneys can't really do that for them. They need that extra help. So these clinics, they're kind of throughout the different areas and they're all over the place. And what this proposition specifically is looking at in terms of these clinics is kind of oversight in terms of how they are run and what kind of staff they have at each one. So this proposition is saying that dialysis is kind of a dangerous procedure, and that all clinics should have at least one doctor on premise to help if there's any kind of issue or problem that arises with the patients that are there getting dialysis. So that's one aspect of it. They also want to kind of free up in terms of that they can't discriminate. They want to make sure that that's in law, that they can't discriminate against different types of insurances and things like that. And that clinics would need permission from the state before kind of closing or reducing services. So what all of this means is this proposition wants a couple of things. It wants more oversight in terms of how laws and the government kind of works with these clinics, and also in terms of like doctor and wanting a doctor at each and every one of these clinics. Now, it's important to note that some already do have this and they have a doctor and some don't. So that's the for side. And there's a few different people that are for this particular proposition. And so those kind of groups are mostly, actually, you may be surprised, they are worker advocacy groups and union labor groups. So also this proposition really helps in terms of like employee rights for those that work at these dialysis centers. Again, going back to kind of like the oversight in terms of looking at them and what practices they're doing. Now, there's a whole other side to this issue, though, that we have to take into consideration, because there's a lot of people who are for voting against Proposition 23. There's a couple of things that come up, and that has to do with money and how these clinics can actually run if this was passed. So the opponents of Prop 23, those who vote against it or want to vote against it, they are saying that this would cause thousands of dollars in money to these clinics and would take doctors from hospital emergency rooms. So what it comes down to is it comes down to the employees themselves and the money that it takes to have all of the things that are included in this proposition. So what they're thinking, the opponents are thinking, excuse me, is you're saying that if it's going to cost these clinics so much money, they're going to start closing down and they won't be able to afford to keep open. And that in turn would hurt the patients because there wouldn't be as many dialysis clinics to go to. So if you consider it, sometimes there's only one clinic in an area, so that closes down. What do these patients do if they don't have any local clinics? So the opponents of this, that's kind of what they're thinking about. They're thinking about that money aspect of it and the doctor aspect of it, because the doctors have to come from somewhere. So there's actually a lot of groups against this opponent. There's quite a few. The American, I think, Medical Association, there's all these different health groups that are against it. And so I know this is confusing, and I know that it's like, okay, wait a second here. Both sides sound like they have a point here. So it's kind of going to be up to you to kind of make this kind of decision and think yourself. So if you're still a little fuzzy or confused about this, there is a great video on this that will help, that's on the guide. And there's also some links to other resources as well that breaks this down. Okay. All right, so let's get to Proposition 24. And what is this? Okay, so Proposition 24 has to do with privacy. So let me back up and make you think about something. Recently, have you ever gone to a website and a pop-up appears and it's talking about your privacy and your data, and it's saying, do you accept like these terms? And you can click to read these terms, and they're very, very long. Or you can just hit accept so you can actually get to the website and move on to what you're actually trying to do. I'm willing to bet a lot of you are probably like me and you just hit accept because you don't want this thing in your face and you just want to get to what you're going to. Those pop-ups, though, they have a reason. And what that reason is that they are about your privacy as a consumer. So what happens is when you hit accept, they are kind of now following your moves online, and they can see what pages that you're going to, your browser history, and they can collect this data and they can sell it to other companies and things like that. And what they use it for is like things like advertising. So they know how to target what advertisements that would work best on you. So if you've ever been on Amazon and you're looking at an item and then you're like, nah, I'm not going to get it. You click off, you go to a different site, and there's the advertisement of what you just looked at. And you're like, whoa, that's weird. They are tracking that. And so what this proposition has to do with is it has to do with your privacy. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to kind of have these laws defined that will keep these companies in check regarding the selling and using of your data. So what they want to do is they want to create this watchdog group that is going to make sure that they are not abusing this data and abusing you and your rights as a consumer. And if they are, they have the right to then fine these companies. And so that they have to pay money for like breaking these rules and laws. So that's what this proposition is about. It's about giving more protections and more privacy laws and kind of keeping these companies in check. However, like the other ones, there's a whole other side to this issue that you have to consider. And so the other side to this is that it can still give too much power to tech companies, because the people that are opposed to this think that this proposition doesn't go far enough in terms of what it's asking companies and the laws that it's wanting to kind of keep intact here. So there's a bunch of groups that are against because they think this should be going farther in terms of keeping these companies in check. Now, one thing that has to do with this particular proposition is that it would give consumers a right to fill out a bunch of paperwork and send these forms into the companies. And what that will do is that is the consumer's right to say, hey, I don't want you using my data anymore. Okay, don't do it. So they send this paperwork, and then the companies have to then say, okay, we're not going to use your data anymore. However, that's a lot of work. And who wants to fill out tons of paperwork so that they can just, not have their data sold and used and things like that? So what these groups that are against Prop 24 is saying, hey, that's a lot of work and that's too much. It should be easier than this. So again, there's kind of two different sides here going on. And so what you have to consider is you have to consider how you feel about your own data being used for companies and things like that, and what you want to see in terms of like the oversight and how we can keep these companies in check. Do you think that there should be more? Do you think this is enough? This is kind of only a start. I highly recommend that you look at the video on this one and you look at the Easy Voter Guide as well. We'll have some information as well. Okay, so we're on to the last one. Okay, and this one is Proposition 25. And this has to do with the bail system. Now, there's a couple of things right up front that you have to know about this. So this is a little bit different than the other propositions that you've learned about. This is called a referendum. And so what that means is that back in 2018, there was a law passed regarding bail. And what this proposition is doing is it's saying that instead of like the legislators and the assemblymen making this law, we're going to make it up to the voters and they're going to decide on this. And so what it's saying here is that if you want to, what they're saying about bail, let me start there actually, is that a lot of times if you get arrested and you go to you go to jail, you have bail to pay. And there's set amounts that you will have to pay in order to get out of jail so that you can await your trial from home. If you can't pay bail, you would have to stay in jail and await your trial from there. So what the law that was passed back in 2018 was doing is that they were getting rid of these set bail amounts. And they were saying people shouldn't have to pay bail to be able to await their trial. They should be able to go home. And bail should only be for people who there's like a serious risk of them fleeing or running, or it's a really, really serious crime where if they're out, they could hurt someone. And so what it's saying is that with the law that was passed in 2018 is that there's going to be like no more set bail amounts for people to have to pay. And so people charged with less serious crimes wouldn't necessarily have that set bail amount. You might not have to pay anything so they can get out. So that was in 2018, but now we have a proposition because they want to leave it up to the voters to decide on this law. And so if you vote yes on Prop 25, you are agreeing with the law. You are saying, yes, the bail system is unfair. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't have to stay in jail. And that the decisions about bail will be about public safety, and it won't come down to how much money you have and how much you're able to pay. It comes down to the safety as a public as a whole. Now, if there's people against this, and so if you vote no on this proposition, what you're saying is that no, we need the bail system in place. It's important. And the people who are against this are saying there's going to be a loss of revenue in terms of the jail and the revenue that it gets from bail and things like that. There's also businesses that have to do with bail. So if you've ever been in this situation or you've seen commercials, there are companies where you can get loans so that you can pay your bail. And so those companies, they make their livelihood on this bail system. So if it were to go away, they would be in trouble. So that's one of the groups that's against it, is this bail companies. And so they think that bail should still exist, and that if they don't, there's also the issue of, if we start letting just people go, what about safety? What if somebody kind of, it slips through and they commit an even more serious crime because they weren't in jail? So once again, two different sides of the story here. And so hopefully this kind of helped give you a little bit of an overview and some kind of the for and against sides of it. I know it's a lot of information to digest. Does anybody have any questions about this one or any of the other ones? Okay, I don't think I'm seeing anything. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to, I'm sorry, is it Emma? Are you doing this slide? Okay.
Yes, it is. All right, everyone. So one of the last things that I mentioned in our overview that would be on your ballot is a bunch of other candidates based upon where you live, right? So you've got the presidents, you've got the House of Representatives, you've got the assemblymen, and you've got all these 12 propositions. And then there's going to be a bunch of other smaller elections that you're going to be voting on. Examples of this I have on this slide, school board positions. I know I will be voting on a school board position for my district, and then trustee positions as well. I know that there are a few trustees on the ballot that you could possibly be voting for depending on where you live. And we have these two links here for you. I put the Voters Edge link in the chat earlier, and I will be putting it again in the next slide, along with the BC Get Out the Vote Live Guide that was also put in the chat earlier, but I will also put it again when we get to the next slide. And Voters Edge, again, it just gives you a list of everything that is going to be on your ballot. And so that would include from like the elections as big as the presidential candidates all the way down to even the school board elections. And you are able to click on all the candidates to see more information about them, as was said earlier. And same thing with the BC Get Out the Vote Guide. It has all of those candidates listed as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jan to talk about the resources that we used for this presentation.
All right, so on all of the resources that we've inputted in this presentation, you can easily, if you feel like you need more information or you feel like you want to go over everything that we went through today, you can just click on these links that Emma put in the chat below. So we use the League of Women Voters Easy Voter Guide, Voters Edge, the Cal Matters video presentations that Emma showed, and as well as our very own library, BC Get Out the Vote Live Guide. So, and if you already received your ballot, you should receive a voter guide. A sample voter guide that will list all the propositions and a more in-depth analysis of them, just like we have presented to you today. And also, you should receive a sample ballot that will have your designated polling place on the back. And if you also if you still need to register, you can also call the county elections office on Flushing Avenue, or look up, go on the Secretary of State's website or currentvote.com in order to have a quick lookup of your designated polling place, and you should be able to call in if you have any other additional questions before Election Day. Also, feel free to reach out to us. You can easily find our emails on the BC website. And also, just a quick reminder for everyone to just get out there and vote. Just show up. This election is one of the more consequential elections in our lifetimes. A lot of things are on the line. The course of our nation and this COVID pandemic. How are we going to handle it? Climate change, institutional racism in our society, racial injustice, along many, many more issues that our vote could powerfully and meaningfully change come November 3rd. So please stay informed, be informed, and just include and encourage, empower anyone who's eligible to vote to be there come November 3rd. So I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for once again showing up and watching our presentation by myself and Miss Laura Lewis from our library and Vice President Emily McNellis. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, I want to second that. I want to thank both Emma and Jan for doing an amazing job. They really did their research and homework, and they did like stellar jobs on breaking down their propositions. As you can just hearing it, you're probably like, whoa, that's a lot. It was a lot to put together as well, and they did an amazing job. So I just kind of want to give them a hand, some applause. I wish we were kind of in person so that we can all clap for them. But they did a really amazing job, and really impressed with kind of how this went. So I also just kind of want to generally say, if you're still here, if you have any questions, if you'd like us to go over something, we're still here. So we'll still look at the chat box just in case. I want to also, thank you. As they said in the chat box, I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you, Emma, I appreciate that. I just wanted to say Voter's Edge really is very helpful and easy to use. It's on my guide, and all you have to do is there's like a little thing for you to actually put your address right into a box on my guide, hit the button, and it takes you right to it. So do some more research, look around, and don't forget to vote. There's many different ways. And so check out my guide to learn how, and like Jen said, we're here to help. So thank you, everyone. This has been great. Okay.
All right, do we stop recording and stuff now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop.
This is always the awkward part. We're still streaming.
Okay. So I think we have one person left, Trenton.
Oh, Trent.
Trenton, do you have any questions or anything that we can help you with? You can put that in the, let me see.
Oh, whoa.
I just added, I put allow to talk. So Trenton, if you have any questions or if you want to put something in the chat box, we're here.
It's probably like doing homework, not. He's on my ethics bowl team, so I think he's here to support. So.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
You guys did a great job. That was so impressive.
Thank
You put me
you.
to shame. You had all this research down. Like, oh man, it was like beautiful. You guys did amazing.
So did you.
Mm, the best. This isn't my strong suit. Give me fake news. That's what I'm good at.
I have like a list of like how I'm voting now. Because like I already had like a preliminary one, but then I like listened a little bit more. I'm pretty iffy on some of them. Some of them really do have strong arguments for both sides, I have to say.
I tell you, my husband and I went back and forth
Yeah.
for like an hour on some of these,
It's really difficult.
talking in circles, like I said.
Yeah.
Because we'd be like, okay, well, that brings us back around again. So just basically, okay, where does that leave us? Oh, I have no idea. Yeah, I tell you, I think there's just too many. There's so many of these. I feel like it should only be a couple so that we can all have time to really focus on some of them. But when there's that many, it just kind of gets to like, okay, I don't know what to do here.
I know there really is a lot.
And you guys had some really hard ones too, like the tax stuff and
Ian had the worst one where I like didn't even realize. And once he started presenting, I was like, oh my God, like he really got the brunt of the load.
I know you guys had some like really good like history stuff that you're including. I was like, oh wow, this is amazing.
All right.
Okay, I did want to ask though, since we're here, are we still doing the election day Zoom call? I did get librarians to sign up.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't want to say anything to the attendees if we weren't going to do it.
I
think since we do want to do it, I think we should market it and send some emails about it.
I'll try to make a new graphic thing. Like
Okay.
make the same design.
What we really need to think about is who's going to create the link. Is Benny going to make that?
Yeah, I'll talk to him.
You can have Benny.
Yeah, so if we can get that ready, that way we can put that in the graphics and then I can send out the emails about it.
Got it. I'm adding that to my to-do list. Ask Benny. I need to I keep forgetting to ask for the time that I will be back from my flight. And then as soon as I do that, I'll add myself to the list whenever I can. Whenever.
Oh, you've done so much. Yeah, I've got librarians on there. And one thing I did want to say is that if while you're on there, if you want to like work with one of the librarians, if there's nobody chatting, which I'm guessing we're not going to get a lot of people, start using them and saying, hey, I have a research thing. Where do I start doing some research? And so you can get some actual paper and research and homework help while you're working with a librarian. Just putting that out there.
That is a good idea. I have 2 research papers due in a couple weeks.
That will be convenient for you.
You get some help while you're waiting for people, and you'll be doing your civic duty and helping your fellow BC students and community, right? Can't beat that.
I can't think of any more perfect of a situation.
Yeah, so if you're trying to get people to sign up, like really sell that point. You can get research help, the librarian.
That's true. Yeah. It's a very good point. All right. I am going to head out.
Yes, thank you for being here. And you're all the way in Florida too. You're dedicated.
This has been my only location that I'm able, because I'm like visiting with family. So I have to like, I'm in the master bathroom because it's the only place where I'm like quiet and no one else is like yelling.
Hey, the sound is really good.
No, because I closed the door and then I locked this one.
Yeah, so you gotta do what you gotta do.
Exactly.
Well, it was really awesome. Thank you guys for doing this. We made it. We did it.
I know, this is the last one.
Yeah, we got through the hard stuff. Now it's just like we can do that thing on election day. That won't be too hard. I don't think we'll get very many, but at least we'll be there and they'll know we're there if they need it.
Yeah, I think that's just cool that we have that.
Yeah. Did you just take off already? I wanted to thank her too.
Yeah, she had to go. She said she had something else to do. I'm not sure. She had to go.
Okay. Okay, I'll have to send her an email. Thank her. Everyone worked really, really hard.
6 more days.
Yes, sir.
That's-
I was trying to.
Thank you. I just saw Trin.
Wow, he tuned in at work. That's
That's nice. I think that's what my niece was doing.
oh my gosh.
Niece one.
The stream is. Stop the stream.
Is it still streaming?